Jocko, you're jacked.
I guess it depends on your definition of jacked.
So how do we stay jacked over 40?
I think the real clear thing is you got to work out. I know that might not seem like a shocking thing, but I work out very religiously, and I think that that's what you have to do. You have to work out, and if you don't work out, especially when you get older. Look, when I was a younger guy, we'd go in the field and come back after a month, and you'd still just be able to kick. Didn't matter. But when you get older, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So yeah, work out. You want to stay strong? Work out. Lift weights, sprint, do jiu-jitsu, train, and then don't eat like an idiot. Don't eat like a idiot. And that's my recommendations.
Do you think people's metabolisms actually slow down, or is it just they're not moving much anymore?
I think my guess is they don't move as much. Because I'm 225, and I've been 225 since my second platoon, and I was 22. So I was 175 when I started basic SEAL training. I was 185 when I graduated. I got up to 200 in my first platoon, and I was trying to get big and strong. And then I got to 225 in my second platoon, and that's kind of where I stayed. I would compete in jiu-jitsu at 212 because then I could do the highest weight class and the open. So I would cut a little bit of weight for that. But generally speaking, my metabolism, and I still eat a lot of food. So I don't know what the science says. I can just tell you my experience that if you keep going and you train hard, I still eat similar to what I used to eat. Now look, when I was going through SEAL training, or when I was going through combat swimmer in a SEAL platoon where you're going on 3-hour dives twice a day, you can eat, you have to eat. You're eating pizza, you're eating spaghetti, you're eating whatever you can. But just normal eating, I've always kind of eaten the same thing. And I eat cleaner now than I used to just because I'm older and I'm not getting drunk and going to a Wendy's at 1 o'clock in the morning, which is a real thing when you're 24 years old or whatever. So I don't do that kind of stuff. And also I don't drink at all anymore. But I haven't drank really for, I don't know, 10 or 12 or something years. I mean, basically since I retired from the Navy, I kind of stopped drinking. And so I guess so maybe that's put that calorie count in there. But also even when my last years in the Navy, I wasn't really drinking that much because I wasn't in a platoon anymore. You're not with the boys. And so you just kind of stop drinking. So to answer your question, I'm not 100% sure, but for my experience, I still eat a lot and I still weigh about the same. And can I put on 7 pounds if I can't train jiu-jitsu for whatever 3 weeks? Sure, I can do that. And then can I train jiu-jitsu and there's good waves and I'm surfing and I lose 12 pounds in 3 weeks? Yep, that can happen. So, the weight fluctuates, but I'm always somewhere in that 225 zone, basically speaking.
I put a link down below for my really good friend Sean's company, Bubs Naturals. They have the only Whole30 approved C8, C10 MCT oil powder. Now, this company is near and dear to me. Those of you that know me know I work a lot with special operations. I work with special forces. Bubs Naturals is a company that was built in honor of Glenn Doherty, whose call sign was Bub. So if you remember the whole Benghazi thing in Libya, he gave his life up for all the Americans there. So he's a very important person to those that are in the special operations community. And 10% of all profits from Bubs Naturals go to charity in Glenn Doherty's name. That being said, they're also amazing products. So they're collagen, they're creamers, but in this case, they're MCT powder. Put it in my tea, I scoop. I usually just dry scoop it because it tastes good. But anyway, that code Thomas20 is a 20% off discount link. And even if you don't use MCT oil, know that it's for a really good cause and something that I truly stand behind. So that link is in the top line of the description underneath this video.
Well, dude, first off, I applaud you for choosing Wendy's. I mean, Wendy's is at least the better fast food option.
I worked at Wendy's when I was a kid, and yes, it is good, tasty fast food. I haven't had it in probably 10 years, but it is good.
But at least it's like real meat. That's one thing I do know about Wendy's. You could have said Jack in the Box.
Is that not real meat?
I mean, Jack in the Box, that was my problem.
That was
Jack in the Box was my problem. And that's like, I was joking about like translucent tacos, and like, that's not real food. At least you chose Wendy's. With that, first off, you actually are right with the science as far as your metabolism slowing down. I mean, I did secretly know the answer to that one. Like, there's countless meta-analysis that back that up. Like, our metabolic rate doesn't actually slow down when we get older. Like, when our metabolic rate goes down, if you line that up with rates of activity, guess what? They're lock freaking step. Mm-hmm. So it's just people start moving less and they don't adjust their eating. It's pretty much that simple. When we come back to nutrition for you said you changed a few things. You eat cleaner. What does that look like for you? So north of 40, what changed? Obviously you're being more aware. Maybe you just have more, again, reps under your belt where you realize, okay, I eat that, I don't feel good. Is it that sort of thing? Or are there things that you could put your finger on? You say, hey, I've changed this.
Yeah, you feel like junk if you eat junk food. I think everybody kind of knows that. If you eat junk, look, you'll feel good while you're eating it because it tastes good, and then you'll feel good for about 7 minutes, and then you feel like trash. And I absolutely know that. Absolutely. If you have a donut, the donut tastes good, you feel good for 6 minutes, and then you feel like crap. And you and I talked earlier about, hey, the psychological pattern of I don't feel like working out, I go to the gym regardless, I start working out, I feel like it now, and I know that when I get done, I feel even better. So the food thing is the opposite. I know this is going to make me feel good right now. I know it's going to taste good right now. I know I'm going to feel good for about 7 minutes, and then I'm going to feel like junk. So knowing the end state that you're heading for, whether it's working out, the end state is I'm going to feel better. So I'm going to do it. The donut, I'm going to feel worse, so I'm not going to do it. So just having a little bit of strategic thinking. So in the military, strategic is long-term thinking and tactical is short-term thinking. So thinking long-term about your working out and about what you're putting into your mouth, thinking long-term instead of short-term, if you do that, you'll make the right decision all the time.
Yeah, when you actually like break it down based on how something makes you feel. When you're young, you can almost like prefrontal cortex your way through it, like override it a little bit. You're just like, okay, I'm young. I don't really think about it. Maybe it's having this impact on me, but you know what? I kind of grit through it. I think probably what happens with age is you just develop a maturity with it. There's just no way around it. You're just like, I'm not going to eat like a 20-year-old. Mm-hmm. Like that's silly. I'm not 20 years old. Like, okay, cool. Accept the fact that I could get away with it. Now I probably really can't. And you were talking about alcohol, and it's kind of interesting because when you look at food, this is somewhat my definition in a way of an addict. I wouldn't call it a definition per se, but it's something that when I look at neurochemically what's going on and how that all comes into play, it's like an addict has the inability to delay gratification, or at least a serious issue with it, mm-hmm. right? You need it and you need it now. And long-term strategy, it doesn't supersede that, right? Life's always kind of about a balance, I think, of that tactical and that strategic move. Like you got to do what's good now, but what also is going to be good long-term, and how do you web those together in a certain way? And if you look at exercise, any way you spin it, short-term, long-term exercise, they're all elements of delayed gratification. The workout right now is going to suck, but you're going to get some endorphins. You're going to get some, glutamate response. You're going to get that GABAergic. You're going to feel good an hour afterwards. But sometimes that's even too much, right? With food, it's flip-flop. You get it quick, and then it sucks. But you're so conditioned to not being able to delay gratification that you don't even think about the fact that it sucks an hour later, because all you want is what you want now, and that's it. That cigarette, that booze, that food, right? It's the quick hit. And being able to flip that, for one, I think takes a certain type of personality, which we can probably see based on, who becomes an addict and who doesn't. Like there is probably a personality, possibly an epigenetic element, but I think a lot of it is conditioning. Do you think that you can train yourself to feel that way, to think that way?
I think you can. I think that actually my podcast co-host is a guy named Echo Charles, and he's been sitting across this table from me for like 8 years. And he continually says that the biggest thing that he's taken away from listening to me talk, unfortunately for him, for hours and hours and hours at a time, is the long-term strategic vision and everything that I try and do. And to me, I grew that over time. I wasn't like that when I was 20. It was 20. What feels good right now? Let's go. Don't care about consequences. Let's make this stuff happen. But I realized, if you're making tactical moves all the time and you're operating in the short term, in the long run, it's going to be a loser. And so it's funny, you talk about food, and it's hard for some people even to see that in an hour they're going to feel bad. Never mind how they're going to feel in 4 years after eating like this, eating junk for 4 years. You can be a totally different person in 4 years from just what you're eating. So yeah, I think it can be developed, and I think a lot of times it's just being conscious of it. Just being conscious of the fact that, I know what this feeling is. Because some people, they're on autopilot. We have to be careful about being on autopilot where you're not consciously thinking about what's happening. We go on autopilot. This bag of potato chips, cool, I'm going to eat them. They're in front of me, I'm going to eat them. And you're just autopilot. Your lizard brain is just ripping that bag open and just getting in there for some salty Lay's potato chips, right? But all you have to do is take a step back and say, hold on a second. Does this help me? Does this help any of my long-term goals whatsoever? Does a bag of potato chips help any of my long-term goals? The answer for everyone is no. It doesn't help any of your long-term goals. There's no one that's going to benefit from eating potato chips. No one, zero. So as soon as people become conscious and become enlightened to the fact that what you're doing right now is going to impact where you're going to be in an hour, in a day, in a year, in 10 years, yes, then you start making better decisions. And I think that's one of the things that happens. Unfortunately, it happens sometimes when we're a little older. But the earlier you learn that, the better off you're going to be. And that's one of the things when parents ask me about their kids, my kid's making some bad decisions right now, I always say you need to connect what they're doing right now to where they're going to be in the future. Because what you're doing right now is going to impact where you're going to be in 5 years. The work that you do in school, how hard you study, getting in trouble, all those things are going to point in one direction or another direction. I was talking, this was a little bit harsh, but I was talking to some 7th graders. And I talked to several classes in a row, meaning it was 4 classes of 7th graders came through this class where I was presenting, and I was presenting, military. It was like a career day. Started off as a career day. By the end of the day, it became, hey, you need to pay attention to what you're doing right now. And what I was saying was, hey, listen, there's 30 of you in this class right now. Some of you are going to live in your car based on the decisions that you're making in 7th grade, in 8th grade, in 9th grade, in 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. Some of you are going to be living in your car, and some of you won't even have a car to live in. In this room, in 15 years, some of you will not have a car to live in. You're going to be living on the street. Some of you are going to own a house. Some of you are going to own 3 houses. Someone in this room is going to own 3 houses in 15 years. That's what's going to happen. Some of you are going to be living on the street. And all that is based on the decisions that you're making right now. So that applies to all of us. The decisions that you're making right now, they're going to impact where you're going to be in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, and in 2 hours. So the earlier you recognize that fact, the better off you're going to be.
And the bottom line is that the scientific literature, I know I'll come back to that, backs up the fact that even if you're 40, even if you're 50, even if you're 60, making changes can absolutely increase your lifespan. And it absolutely can increase, I kind of don't like this word, but health span. Your ability to do when you're 85.
Yeah.
And I think you got to ask yourself that question. Like everyone wants to baby everything. Everyone wants to downplay it and make it into this super innocent discussion when no one wants to talk about the actual hard stuff. Everyone's afraid to talk about the hard stuff. The bottom line is that I don't care if you're 55 years old or you're 60 years old. I know I'm not that old enough to be able to speak from experience, so I know people can rain down on that, but I will tell you, 55 years old, you can make a change today and it will affect you when you're 60, and you need to address that head on. Because if you're not addressing it head on, then look at what's going to be.
Yeah. It's not going to get better. Yeah. You're not going to improve your mobility between the ages of 55 and 60 if you don't actively improve your mobility. You're not going to improve your strength between the ages of 55 and 60 if you don't actively improve your strength. You're not going to improve your cardiovascular health if you don't actively improve your cardiovascular health between 55 and 60. And that's not true when you're 20. Because when you're 20 and you turn 25, you got stronger. Most likely you got stronger. You are probably just as healthy. You're probably just as mobile. And it changes. And if you don't stay ahead of it, you will get caught. And that's why, like, working out, there's movements that you can do when you work out that if you don't do them, you'll lose them. And you got to be very careful of that. And then when you do lose them for whatever reason, you can work to get them back. I hurt my elbow very badly doing jiu-jitsu, and I couldn't lock out my elbow, which meant I couldn't do overhead squats. And so for a long period of time, like 9 months, I couldn't do an overhead squat. And when I finally went back to doing overhead squats again, my shoulders were way tight. It was super uncomfortable. And I had to go PVC pipe. And I thought to myself, oh, is this what happens to people? They lose a movement and they surrender. They submit and they say, oh, I can't do this anymore. I'm too old. I can tell you this factually, no, it's not true. You're going to have to take an ego hit and get a PVC pipe out and go through slow range of motions. And I would have to do with the PVC pipe in front of the squat rack where the PVC pipe is staying in a vertical plane so that I can keep my shoulders where they're supposed to be. I had to rehab myself. And this can happen with anything. I was rebuilding my house. And I lived in a house that had a low garage, so my garage gym had a low ceiling. And I couldn't do muscle ups in there. And when I got my normal gym back and went back to doing muscle ups, I could do like one muscle up. And same thought, oh, this is what happens to people. Maybe if I had not done a muscle up for another 4 months, maybe it would have been gone. And then I say, oh, I guess I can't do this anymore. Now, I'm telling you, you don't need to say that. What you need to say is, oh, I let this particular skill slide, and I need to now work to get it back. And when you get older, like you said, 50, I'm only 52, but I imagine when you're 55, those things are going to slip away a little faster. But if you maintain them, they'll stay with you. So you work, you get it back.
You said something that is one of the most important things for people and their metabolic rates as they get older. And I don't even think you probably didn't even realize how integral it is and how important it is. And that's to say that you said, I eat about the same amount, right? There's this, have you ever heard of G-Flux before? Or energy flux? I'll get on my nerdy horse for a second, but if you have someone that eats 5,000 calories a day and burns 5,000 calories per day, and you compare that to someone that eats 3,000 and burns 3,000, they're both at net zero, right? Wrong. The person that eats 5,000 and moves 5,000 has a higher metabolic rate and is burning more. Literally speaking, it's called G-Flux. They actually burn more because for all intents and purposes, there's almost a mobilization cost, an energy cost associated with turnover. And I can think logically of a few things that happen. People get older, they get injured, they move less. Maybe they start to try to do the right thing, so they eat less. Or maybe they just get busy, right? And they start eating less. And so one of the things that you do by eating the same amount and moving the same amount, it is significantly more important to eat more and move more than it is to move more and eat less, or move less and eat less. Eat more and move more. Get the fire burning hot, and then move and get it hotter, and then eat more and get it hotter, because it's that metabolic slowdown, that metabolic rate that decreases not because you're older, but because you're not moving as much. That is going to be the problem. And then you get into a protein discussion. So I ask you, I'm assuming you eat a lot of protein, but do you have an idea how much you eat?
I eat a lot of protein. Yeah, I eat a lot of protein.
If you had to guess.
Gosh, I went through this drill with someone the other day. It's plenty. It's plenty.
Enough. Yep.
Yeah, it's plenty of protein. Yep.
Yeah. That does come down probably the second, probably the most or the second most. Mm-hmm. It's tough to tell because Personally, I don't fixate on calories too much. Just eat enough. And protein is the staple, right? But I think we've had so much weird discussions over the years, and people just don't know when they get older where they stand with protein. Do I not eat protein? Is protein bad for my kidneys? Is it bad because I'm older? Bottom line is no. Like, eat protein, and I think that's another thing I notice. Older people do. And they just start decreasing their protein intake because it's also just maybe harder to eat and a bigger pain in the ass sometimes for people. Not for me. Like, I can eat protein all day, but
I can too.
When you look at your nutrition and how it's changed, were you ever focused on, you mentioned something in our other interview, so I want to bring this back, talking about operators and other guys in the teams and stuff that were like Ferraris. Their bodies were so fine-tuned. They would eat perfectly. They would do this, and then they'd get in a situation where they couldn't eat like that, and they would probably mentally and physically implode. How have things changed for you now, where you are at your age now, versus maybe where you were 30? Is it more flexible with timing? Is it more or less flexible, even though you're eating quote unquote cleaner?
So when you say more flexible with timing, you're talking about the actual time that I eat.
Talking about, like, were you ever a 6 meal a day kind of guy, and now you're, don't pay attention to it as much? Or were you ever this person that was saying, okay, like, yeah, I eat a lot of food, but I periodize it around my workouts. I do this and that. There's elements where you can be the Ferrari, so to speak, without going all the way. Like, I don't want to say drinking the Kool-Aid, but so much so, like, okay, here's my pre-workout, here's my post-workout. Are you more relaxed now than you were in the past? Do you focus on that stuff?
Yeah, I would say in the SEAL teams, you eat when you can. And so you get done with whatever evolution you're doing. Again, a combat swimmer. This is, you're going to go into the team. You're going to prep your dive rigs. You're going to prepare for a dive. You're going to go out and do a 2 or 3 hour dive. You're burning a lot of calories. You're cold in the water. You're sitting in the water after you hit your target. Like, it's a physically demanding evolution. You get back from that, you have a period of time to eat, and you're going to eat. And then you're going to go and do another one of those. Same thing. Similar dive, 2 hours, 3 hours on bag, underwater, or 2 hours underwater, but 3-4 hours in the water. And if you get done with that, you're going to eat. And so you're eating pretty much when you can. That's the way I kind of, if you're asking me to reflect on when I ate in the SEAL teams, it was when I could. And that meant when you're not working, you're eating. So that's what I did. I would say now I eat. One thing that whenever I was in the field in the SEAL team, so I mean, to really get into some detail here, I was a radio man when I was a young enlisted SEAL, which meant I carried a radio in the field, which meant I had an extra 30 pounds of weight to carry and extra battery. So you're carrying a lot of weight. So when you go in the field for 4 days, what you really need is water. So I'm carrying a bunch of water. So now I've got gallons and gallons of water, my radio, my weapon, my ammunition, and I'm really heavy. So guess what I'm not bringing? Food. I'm just not bringing food. Well, let me phrase that. I'm bringing a small amount of food. So an MRE meal, I would only bring the meal itself, just the actual meal, whatever it was, ham slice. I'd bring one of those a day. And then I would bring some trail mix. And that's what I would eat. That's what I would eat for 3, 4, 5 days in the field. That's it. And so I'd like lose weight in the field, but I didn't like to really eat in the field, and I didn't want to carry that extra weight, so I just would suck it up. I also don't like to train with food in my stomach. So like some people that eat before they work out in the morning, I don't like to eat before I work out in the morning. And again, I'm not trying to tell anyone to do this. I don't know what your life is like. I don't know what works for you. You should do what feels good for you. I'm just telling you, ask me what I do. I'm going to tell you what I do. I'm not making any recommendations. I don't eat before I work out in the morning. I don't like to have food in my stomach when I'm working out because I feel like I'm going to puke, and I don't like that feeling. So I don't eat before I work out in the morning. I also don't take any pre-workout. I don't eat anything. I don't have any coffee. I have water in the morning. That's what I go work out. Occasionally I'll kick down a pre-workout if I'm just really, once every 2 months, I'll have some pre-workout. But other than that, I'm just going in there and I'm going to work out. Then 10 o'clock, in the morning, I'll start feeling a little bit hungry. I'll have usually some mixed nuts. I'll eat some mixed nuts, and that kind of tides me over for a while. And then I'll have a protein shake. I make protein shakes. I have my protein shakes. They taste awesome, and they're really gratifying to me to eat. So I feel great. I get done with that, and I have plenty of time to digest before I go train jiu-jitsu, which like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to train jiu-jitsu. I don't want to have food in my stomach when I'm training jiu-jitsu. So I've already digested what I ate at 11 o'clock or maybe noon. And so I've digested my food. I go train, get done training, come home, and I'm going to eat. I'm going to eat a steak. I'm going to have another protein shake and a big salad. And that's kind of what I do. That's my eating pattern. And then I work a little bit more, hang out with my wife and kids, and then go to sleep. So there's my work. There's my pattern of eating, and as you can see, it's driven not by the optimum time to eat it's driven by my optimum time to eat, that my food is digested when I'm doing strenuous things, is if that makes sense. And same thing, like going on operations, like in Iraq, I would not eat I would barely eat anything before I'd go in the field. Now we're doing shorter operations. We're only going out for like 3-4 hours, or maybe we're going out for 24 hours, maybe 36 or 48 hours, but I'm not going to have a big meal because I don't want food in my gut when I'm out in the field. So, and that's why, I know you were mentioning fasting, and to me, I feel great when I fast. I feel super, and it doesn't really impact anything that I'm doing. I remember I was doing a 72-hour fast, and I was rolling with a guy that I roll with all the time in jiu-jitsu, and he was like, "Do you feel on today?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to tell you something when we're done." And so we got done training, and he's like, "Well, what did you want to tell me?" I said, I'm on the tail end of a 72-hour fast right now, and I did squats this morning, heavy, and it just didn't impact, the roll. So that's kind of my eating pattern. I mostly eat so that I can have my food digested by the time I'm doing my next strenuous training activity, which is probably the lamest answer you've ever heard.
No, I think that's one of the most awesome answers I've ever heard, and especially because it resonates with my style, right? That's
right on.
I feel like fractally eating is the way to go, right? Like
you say fractally?
Like eating in a fractal fashion, like
okay.
Fractal eating, right? Yeah. I think Mark Sisson put it like that, which is great. It was just like, okay, we've got intermittent fasting, which I love, but at the end of the day, like intermittent fasting, you're kind of constrained to a schedule in some ways. Like fractal eating, you're eating when you need to eat. And sometimes it requires being in tune with your body enough to know when to eat. So yeah, a schedule gamifies it, and I get that. So I'm all for that. But at the same time, it's like just, okay, eating for when you can be digested and have optimal performance, maximal performance at that point, that's ideal. And I think probably years of conditioning yourself like that in the teams has probably translated into you, even at a fat adaptation mitochondrial level, you are probably a lot better off than other people that have just been conditioned to just eat whenever something's in front of them, right? So it's kind of interesting. I mean, you look at that. It's one of the reasons that I work with the unit guys is they brought me in specifically to talk about being able to eat in constrained environments versus unconstrained environments. And my bottom line with them was, I told them this last time I was out there about a month ago at Bracco. I guess it's Liberty now. But anyway, that's what we talked about was, okay, well, fasting, going without food for a period of time, I want you to think of it as training with a weight vest on. You're training with a nutritional weight vest. Like you now have conditioned yourself so much that you are training in a depleted state. It does not impact you. There might be a situation where when you are fueled, maybe you get an extra little bit of performance out of it. Maybe you don't. But if you do, it's only a win, right? You've trained yourself to train and to operate in a depleted state. That is a nutritional weight vest. Then when you are fueled, it's like, hell yeah, it's a bonus. Great, I'm fueled. But you're not going to be in an issue when you are depleted or when you don't have fuel. And I think as we get older, the more that we can be adapted to not having fuel, the better we will be at muscle preservation. The better we'll be at retaining our lean mass because our bodies are adapted, being like, hey, we're not in panic mode. We're not hitting the panic button because you ran out of food. You entitled person that has had food 7 meals a day for the last 40, 50 years. Now, all of a sudden, guess what? You have 2 meals and you're not going to starve. Your body's going to be like, I know how to deal with this. So I am inclined to think that you having so many decades of doing that, psychologically, epigenetically, even mitochondrially, you're probably conditioned for that. But I mean, you're speaking my language. Like I can tell I get heated about and passionate about that. Like that's the kind of stuff I try to drill into. Like stop the food addiction. Stop it now, psychologically, physically. Like you can eat and eat a lot, but it doesn't really matter when.
Yeah. Yeah. And that food addiction is a real thing. That's another thing that I like about fasting is it recalibrates your hunger and it recalibrates your taste buds. So if you fasted, water tastes delicious when you're fasting. It's awesome. Same thing when like going in the field. You go in the field and you're short on water. When you come out of the field, you're like, water is the most beautiful, luscious, precious thing in the world. I love water. And when you're fasting, water tastes really good because I drink water when I'm fasting. Water tastes really good. Food, when you get done with a fast, you're like, oh, this carrot is so good. It tastes delicious. Whereas if you're not fasting, the only thing that tastes good is a freaking Twinkie. You're like, the only thing I want is a Twinkie, right? So fasting recalibrates that. It also recalibrates your hunger. And this is something with, and please don't try this at home, but when it comes to breath holding, when you're holding your breath, when you're going through basic SEAL training, you realize that there's certain knocks you're going to get at the door. And you'll get one that's really quick, like, hey, you need to breathe. And you realize, oh, I don't need to listen to that one. That doesn't matter. And then you get another knock at the door. It's like, hey, you really should breathe right now. And you can ignore that one as well. And the third one is like, hey, you need to breathe. And that's the one you got to listen to. But what do they call it? Chicken necking, when you're like, that actually you don't need to listen to that. That's just a physiological response.
Yeah, it's a CO2.
And you can just ignore it. So the same thing will happen when you take away food. You realize, oh, I'm so hungry. You're not hungry. It's been 6 hours. Like, you're going to be fine. Like, I remember when my kids were cutting weight for wrestling, I haven't had anything since yesterday. And I'm like, you can live for 30 days with no food whatsoever. You're going to be fine for the next 8 hours. You're going to be fine. So recalibrate. That's to me, one of the most positive things about fasting is recalibrating your hunger, recalibrating your taste buds. Let's get those things to where they should be.
Yeah, no, amen to that. I mean, you look at, and the ability to do hard things in that state, I think that's another place where people get twisted at any age, right? It's like, okay, I haven't had food, I can't push it hard. I mean, one of the most important things to do without food is tell your body that your muscle is relevant. Don't burn it. It's like the difference between someone that's laying on their deathbed, not eating, wasting away, compared to, Dominic D'Agostino, right? I mean, it's like Dr. Dom D'Agostino. I mean, the guy deadlifts, 705 after a 5-day fast? I mean, he's hitting PRs at a 5-day fast, right? So it's like, okay.
So does that mean it's psychological?
I think there is an element to that, for sure. I think there is in terms of psychological being people thinking they need food, or psychological meaning the performance or enhancements that you might get in fasting.
I haven't eaten. I'm feeling weak. I'm not going to be able to max my deadlift today.
Yeah, I think Dr. Andy Galpin put it really well when I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago. And this is great coming from him because he and I don't necessarily agree on everything because he's very academic, evidence-based, which I tend to like parallel with that. But I also, let's look what's happening here right now. He even said, if you can't go 24 hours without food, there's a problem.
Dude, that's ridiculous.
There's a problem.
Imagine cavemen.
Yeah.
They were going 3 weeks without food because they didn't kill a freaking saber-toothed tiger or a woolly mammoth or whatever. Yeah. That's totally ridiculous.
I could show you reasons why in a fasted state, to an extent, you might have additional performance benefit. Some people would say that's absolute BS. When you look at a lot of the big bodies of literature, yeah, almost all of them suggest that for like that extra 1% performance for an athlete, yeah, having fuel, carbohydrates on board, full glycogen stores, okay, I can see that. But there's such a psychological element with the adrenaline that is pumped out in a fasted state. Like you've got this catecholamine effect where norepinephrine is peaked because you're, especially the deeper into a fast that you get, not to mention ketone bodies that are elevated. There's all kinds of reasons why you're cognitively switched on. So when you're talking about an athlete who can almost unconsciously move that way, it's not taking a whole lot cerebrally for them to like push it. Okay, then I can understand because they've already, their brain isn't necessarily the issue. But for a lot of people where their brain is their main governor for them being able to push it a little bit further, I find a lot of people when they're in a fast state end up hitting PRs or end up pushing a little harder or going a little longer because their brain is out of their way. Their brain is switched on. They're not telling themselves they can't. And they also don't have the distraction of food because you're thinking about food all the time. What am I going to have post-workout? No, you just do it. Like you just eliminated a variable, go.
If you were going to put me in some kind of a physical competition for performance, I would want to be probably 36 hours into a fast. So if I was going to do a jiu-jitsu competition or some kind of a physical event, I'd want to be probably 36 hours into a fast. I think that's where I'd be really ready to crush. And this is sort of like in a general physical thing, because I know that if I was going to do a marathon where your glycogen stores are going to come into play, because I understand that, but I'm talking for, hey, if I'm going to fight you, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that when I'm 36 hours fast if I had to do it optimally.
Yeah, you're switched on. Mm-hmm. You know, the 36-hour fast, they call it a monk fast. And one of the reasons there's a couple of reasons. One of the reasons they call it a monk fast is because the state of Zen you hit at that 36-hour fast. 36 hours, that is a mark where you're just like, I'm calm, I'm good. You know, after that, there is a little bit of a line of diminishing return. You do start to deplete, but I do think that someone that's conditioned can really rock that. But 36 hours is that is a sweet spot number for a lot of people.
That's interesting that I called out that number.
Yeah. Well, it's like you're producing enough ketones at that point. You're like you're just on. And I think when you look at people that are older, it's they get so scared of that. I think this is going to get dark for a second in some ways, but it's like, I think people, especially when they're older, they think of fasting, they have to have a paradigm shift of how they look at it. They associate it with like death and dying and like, okay, I'm not eating. Like if I'm not eating, I'm dying. Like, no, it's not that way. Like it's an adaptation. You have to get adapted to it. And the older that people get, we talked about this in another video, but they're more fear averse, right? It's like, okay, well, I have years and years of getting hungry and being a nasty person when I'm hungry and I'm hangry and I didn't make good decisions. And like, did you really make bad decisions? Or like, were you really hangry? Or were there a million other things going on and you just associated it with the fact that you didn't eat? A lot of times when people don't eat and they're not consciously not eating, they're only not eating because they have other going on in their lives. Maybe have you stopped to think that it's the other that was going on that was making you hangry? It wasn't the actual absence of food. It was the fact that you were out at the zoo with your family and your kids were being crazy and this and that. You didn't have time to eat. You didn't have to, and maybe that was actually bothering you, not the absence of the food.
Yeah, that would make sense. I know oftentimes I'll look up in a busy day and I'll just all of a sudden be, well, you know, it's 3:00 in the afternoon or something. And I'm approaching a 24-hour fast just because I was up and busy, worked out, did this thing, had this call, met with this client, don't like to eat before I go and speak to someone. So I'm not, boom, next thing you know, it's 3:00. I haven't eaten and I feel fine. No factor.
Yeah. Have you ever looked at calories over the course of, this is what I do, it's kind of fun. Look at them over the course of a week versus the course of a day.
I have not.
Yeah. Try it. I mean, just like you probably don't count your calories and I don't recommend you do. It's, I don't want to say it's a waste of time. Some people do definitely need to have that. Like they need to see it, right?
Yeah.
But if you say, okay, rather than saying, I'm going to eat 3,000 calories today, or I'm going to eat 2,000 calories per day, like scrap that, get a rough idea of it and look how many calories you eat over the course of a week, because that's going to give you a lot of grace and say that, you know what, when I do that, I realize, wow, some days, shoot, I ate 500 calories that day, but I ate 4,000 that day. At the end of the week, net, I'm right where I need to be. And you almost like think of these miniature bulks and cuts throughout your week. If people need to gamify it again, if they need to have that, because we don't have a clock that resets every night at midnight. And I've talked about this so many times in videos. It's just like, we don't. Like, it's like the metabolic, like what window do you want to look at? You want to look at over an hour, over a day, over a week, over a month? You could arguably look at it over a longer period of time. Just where are you netting out, and stop tripping out about, hey, like I need to eat every X amount of hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, it's pretty easy for me to tune up what I'm eating. So in other words, let's say I had to cut weight for a jiu-jitsu tournament. It's real easy for me to do that, and I don't have to count anything. Like I know how much I'm eating every day, like generally speaking. Oh yeah, so I'm just gonna have half a protein shake in the morning instead of a whole one. Oh, and at night I'm gonna have half a steak instead of a whole one, or 4 chicken thighs instead of 7. Like, it's not that hard for me to make those adjustments, and you see them almost immediately on the scale, right? It's like, oh yep, there you go. And, oh yeah, I dropped a little bit more weight than I wanted to. I can easily tune it back up. So I think because I'm also super boring when it comes to eating. Like I'm not adventurous at all. When I grew up, we didn't eat a variety of food. It was like hamburger on a muffin for breakfast, on an English muffin for breakfast, hamburger on bread for lunch, hamburger on roll for dinner. Like my palate didn't develop very well. And so I eat the same stuff over and over again, super boring. So it's really easy for me to say, oh yeah, I'm normally eating this big of a steak. I'll eat half that or 3/4 of it. I'm normally eating, I'm normally having a Milk protein shake or 2 of them for lunch. No, I'm gonna have 1. And it's really easy for me to fine tune that because I'm very boring eater. I'm not like, well, I wonder how much is in this, some fancy food that I don't know the name of. Insert that fancy food here, but I don't know what it is. But what's a fancy food that someone eats sometimes? Give me an example.
I don't know because I don't live in that world either. Escargot.
Yeah. So escargot or like, oh well, I haven't had one of these. There's other types of bread that they make their sandwich with, and what's like, I just don't have any of that stuff in my life. My refrigerator is boring. My cupboard is boring. It's all boring, which makes it very easy for me to tune because I know what it does to me. I know how it makes me feel. I know what it does to the scale if I have to cut weight for some reason. And it's just very simple because it's so boring.
Can we let's talk supplements for a second too? Like what's are the things that you've added into your life in the way of supplements? And I mean, obviously a disclaimer, I know you have a supplement line, but that may or may not influence what you take. But bottom line is, I'm sure things have changed as you've gotten older. Are there things, has your view on supplementation changed as you've gotten older? And of course, what you take?
Yeah. So my history with supplements, obviously in the SEAL teams, we took supplements. I would say we were on the forefront of a lot of supplements. We were on the forefront of nutrition. We got to the forefront of nutrition as we started bringing in civilian experts to help us with our nutrition. I was on the front lines of phosphagain. Remember that one? Mm-hmm. And creatine. I was on the front lines with metrics when you had to take two different things. Yep. I was on the front lines. I was there. I was in the game. And so I was always about that. And then I was on the front lines with one particular brand that I loved. They made a protein powder. I loved it. I ate it all the time. And a matter of fact, I liked it so much that I gave it to my kids. And my kids were, especially my son, he was eating this protein shake all the time. It was one of the first words he could say was this protein shake. And so he would say, and he'd name because he couldn't say other words. Like he knew how to communicate that he wanted my attention. Then he knew how to say in his sippy cup, he wanted that protein. So here I am I'm drinking this protein 2-3 times a day. And it turns out the Consumer Reports comes out, there's excessive amounts of heavy metals in this. And so I do some research, like what does that mean? And what it turns out is if you have one of these shakes and you're a 190-pound grown man, then it's okay. Those levels are okay. But if you're a 4-year-old kid and you're drinking 2 of those things a day, or you're me and I'm 225 pounds, but I'm drinking 2 or 3 of those things a day, it was pretty shocking to me that could be the situation. So I backed off supplements. That was towards the end of my career. Backed off supplements. And then over time, there was some particular supplements that I took religiously. I'd met a guy that was 63 years old. And I was probably 30 when I met this guy. And he was jacked. And this is like pre-TRT. At least I didn't know about TRT. Maybe he was on TRT, but this was were people on TRT in the 90s?
No.
Yeah. So it was in the 90s. And he's jacked. And so I didn't like right now, if I see someone jacked, I'm thinking maybe they're on TRT. But back then, seeing a 63-year-old man that's jacked and looks young and healthy, and I started talking to him, and he told me what he said. He's like, krill oil, glucosamine, chondroitin, curcumin. He's like, you should take this stuff. And I started taking it religiously, and I have ever since. That's why one of the first supplements I came out with was Super Krill and then Joint Warfare, which included all those ingredients in an awesome mixture. So those things were made directly based on what I actually use. And when Brian and Pete, my business partners at Origin USA, started talking to me about making supplements, my thing was like, listen, I'll only make supplements that I will be stoked and happy that my own family and children are taking. That's the bar. And they were like, well, it's going to be expensive, but we can do it. And I said, well, okay, well, let's try it. And that's how it got started. And once we made the Joint Warfare and the Super Krill, and people were stoked on it, and it's amazing, like the amount of subscriptions. That's, to me, is a good way to tell how well something is working. Like, people are subscribed to Joint Warfare and Super Krill for years. And, I tell people all the time, like, hey man, just do yourself a favor and take this stuff. And so then we started making protein, protein powder, and eventually we got into ready to drink protein. And eventually we've made an energy drink that, again, over in Iraq, in my Humvee, I'm the vehicle commander in the Humvee, so I'm sitting in the passenger seat. My driver's to my left, and right in front of me, my first deployment, we've got an ammo, a pouch, and in those pouches, or a series of pouches, and in those pouches, I have a flash grenade, a flash grenade, a flash grenade, a frag grenade, a frag grenade, a frag grenade, and then energy drink. Because you're out there, you might need to huck a frag at somebody, you might need to huck a crash at somebody, or you might need to get a freaking hit of caffeine because you've been out on patrol, or you've driven up from Baghdad to Haditha or down to Najaf, and you've been on the road for 5 hours. Then you went and sat in overwatch position or did a direct action mission. Now you're driving back. Guess what? The enemy doesn't care that you've been awake for 22 hours. They don't care. They'll still attack you. So energy drink. Well, you look at the ingredients of those energy drinks. And again, this is very lucky of being in the SEAL teams where we had really people that were forward thinking on nutrition. And you look at the ingredients, you're like, oh, this is just terrible. I'll drink it right now because I'm tired, but it's terrible. I'm going to feel like junk. And when we get back in 4 hours, I'm going to feel terrible. And so when we started talking about an energy drink, I put out the parameters of, hey, listen, I don't want to overload this thing with caffeine, which is counterintuitive because when you're trying to sell something that's supposed to give people energy, well, put a bunch of caffeine in it, they're going to feel energy. So I capped it. I was like, hey, strong cup of coffee, 95 milligrams of caffeine. That's what we did. The other thing is I didn't want any artificial sweeteners. Obviously, I didn't want sugar in there, but I didn't want any artificial sweeteners. So we went down the path of figuring out how to sweeten something naturally. We've progressed down that to where we've got a great combination of allulose, monk fruit, and Reb M, which is fermented cane sugar. So it's all natural sweeteners. Awesome. And then the final thing was, I didn't want to put any of the chemical preservatives in it. And the only way to get around that was to pasteurize, meaning you heat the drink up where it kills whatever bacteria might be in there. So to have a stable shelf life, it's like what they do with milk, pasteurized milk, unless you drink raw milk, get some. But there was no factory that had a pasteurization line or a pasteurization tunnel on a canned energy drink line. So we had to convince one manufacturer to build that for us. They did. And so that's the energy drink. So that's kind of the where I go to with these things. And that's kind of where we've ended up. So I use, as you've seen, I've been drinking some of my energy drink today. I already had a protein shake on my way here. When I got done working out, I did exactly what I told you earlier. I had a handful of nuts on the way here. It was a little earlier, but I knew I was going to be in here. And so I had a handful of nuts on the way here, drank a protein shake on the way down here, 30 grams of clean protein, and then a little bit of energy from the drink. So I'm ready to get after it. And that's sort of the story of my supplements. I take Joint Warfare every day. I take Super Krill every day. I take Time War every day. Those are supplements that I make. And yeah, magnesium, There's a big hype train on magnesium. I just started taking that at night. Feels good. So that's where I'm at supplementation wise.
Yeah, keeping it basic, man. I think that's you get into the world of people just wanting to so much variety, so much to choose from, and more is better. Let's just at a certain point, narrow it down, eat some ground beef and get your vitamins there, and then you supplement here. Use supplements as they're supposed to be. Supplemental, right?
Supplemental. And look, the primary food group for me is steak. You know what I mean? So I eat a lot of steak. Yes, I believe supplements is supplement. Now, did I have time to cook up a steak on my way down here? Nope, I didn't. So protein shake comes in handy.
I want to ask you one more thing. Okay, you're obviously up early. What time do you go to bed? You're usually up at at least by 4 a.m. It seems as though, right? I mean, that's kind of like your
like my alarm clock will go off at 4:30, and sometimes I wake up a little bit before that. But yeah, around 4:30, and I'll go to bed between 9:30 and 10:30. Hopefully, do I get a little bit of insomnia sometimes and stay awake later? Yes, I do. So yeah, I try and what's that from 9:30 at night till 4:30 in the morning? What's that? We're looking at 7 hours or 6.5 hours if I go to bed at 10. So yeah, I wrote a book called Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual, and I explained to people that you do need to sleep, and the more sleep you can get, the better. So I'm not anti-sleep. I also there's some genetic component to it because I don't need a lot of sleep. My oldest daughter, when she was in high school, she'd be studying when I would go to bed at night, and I'd wake up in the morning at 4:30 in the morning, and she'd be up studying. My middle daughter, she'll get out of bed when you yank her out of bed when she was a kid. Like you had to physically get her out of bed. My son sort of balanced, and then my youngest daughter also a sleeper, but my wife, she's going to sleep, man. She's going to sleep, and she'll wake up at some juncture, but she really likes to sleep. And whereas even if I don't have an alarm clock, where was I? I was just out on the East Coast for 5 days and came back, and I was like, I'll just wake up later. And sure enough, I woke up at 3:30 in the morning because my clock is a little bit messed up. So yeah, sleep is awesome. Get sleep. I'm not anti-sleep. I'm pro-sleep. But you can also lie to yourself and, tell yourself when your alarm clock goes off that it's better for you to sleep than to get up and work out. Well, go to bed earlier. Yeah. Go to bed earlier, because the cycle that I don't like to get caught on, and I have to be careful of this, is if I go to sleep and wake up late, I go to sleep later. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to sleep later, I'm going to wake up later, and I'm going to get in this weird cycle where I don't like that. I don't want to be up late at night. I want to be up early in the morning making things happen. So I'm a little cautious of that. Even if I take a nap, that can keep me up until
game over for
1 o'clock in the morning, and that's a bummer. So I guess what I could do is I was on a plane, fell asleep for an hour. Now I can't fall asleep, so I'll sleep in the morning. Nope, I won't do that. I'll actually get up early because I want to go to bed the next night at 9:30 or 10 o'clock or 10:30. I don't want to be up now until midnight, and it just messes up your sleep cycle. So I try and wake up the same time every day. That's basically it.
I don't know if you've seen over the last year and a half or so, there's been a lot of papers that have come out on that. The most important thing is we're starting to find it's less about how many hours you sleep, more just about the consistent bedtimes and or wake times.
Yep.
It's just go to bed at the same time every night. Yep. And if you wake up at 3 a.m., you wake up at 3 a.m. Just sometimes we're not these perfectly calibrated machines that require exactly 8 hours and 4 minutes every night. It's kind of like, I have a feeling, this is my hunch, and I might get destroyed for saying it, but I mean, just like now, we look at the food guide pyramid and we say, are we going to look at one point and say 8 hours? Because I will tell you, my lab works great, and there are some nights where I go to bed at the same time every night. Go to bed at 9:30. Sometimes I wake up at 2:30 or 3 a.m. and I'm just ready to go.
Ready to rock and roll.
And I don't feel crappy that day. I feel perfectly fine, and I have enough sleep pressure to go to bed at the same time. And the most important thing to me is, that's an easy target. It's an easier target for me to know what time I go to bed than it is the moving target of, okay, well, do I go to bed at 11 and then I have to move it to 7? Like, that's more disruptive.
Yeah. You know, when people ask me, you know, aren't you tired? Or they'll say to me, hey, I feel tired when I don't sleep enough or I'm not getting enough sleep. The first thing I say to them is, what are you eating? What are you eating? Because if you're eating pizza and you think you're going to feel good the next day, you're not going to. It's not going to happen. First thing you do is clean up what you're taking into your body and start working out every day. If I can tell you right now, if I eat like junk, I sleep like junk. If for whatever reason, if I'm having bad workouts, I'm not going to sleep well. The more I work out, the better I sleep. You know, if I can lift, run, surf, and do jiu-jitsu, I sleep epic. If I didn't surf, it's a little less epic. If I didn't do jiu-jitsu, it's a little. If I didn't run, it's a little. If I didn't work out, I'm not going to sleep well. So if you actively put out during the day physically, I think you sleep better. And if you eat clean, you sleep better. So if you want, and I optimally, even when I'm working out really hard, as long as I'm eating clean, the sleep goes like, it's fast. You don't need, I don't need to sleep for 9 hours because I did a bunch of physical stuff. I just sleep deeper and better.
Yeah.
So if you're having trouble feeling tired, it's probably because you're not working out and you're not eating well. And then the third thing I would check is, okay, well, are you going to bed at the same time and are you waking up at the same time every day or close to it?
I think you nailed it, man. People forget sleep pressure is a real thing. Like, and that's just, you got to create pressure to sleep. It's like, you've got to, you know, and it's, you can go too far the other way. You go too far the other way with intensity, not with necessarily volume. What I mean by that is, like, if you were to say, I'm not sleeping good, but I work out an hour a day, so I'm going to redline it even more, that might just fry your CNS so you don't sleep, right? But what can do it is adequate volume, right? It's like the days when, if I'm out rucking for 7 hours or something, I sleep like a rock. And it wasn't insanely intense, but it was this long duration that created this pressure, and I sleep like a rock. And a lot of times, the more conditioned that you are, the more fit that you are, and the healthier and the better that you eat, unfortunately and fortunately, the more pressure you need to build because your body is healthy and resilient. So in order to get yourself to knock out, it's like, it doesn't, input, output, doesn't make sense. If you don't push the boundaries a little bit, if you don't move and exert, why do you need to sleep? The only people that matters for are people that are probably metabolically unhealthy or people that have poor diets where their bodies are so inefficient at recovering that they just require more and more and more. It's like we're missing this piece of common sense in this discussion because everyone wants to be a sleep expert and everyone wants to optimize. It's like we're missing the common sense of just, hey, you'll probably sleep. If you take your dog to the park and you throw that tennis ball 1,000 times, watch what happens when they get back. Right? Yeah. And we forget that.
Yeah, no doubt.
Anyway, man, where can everyone find you?
Jocko.com, JockoFuel.com, EchelonFront.com, OriginUSA.com, and then I'm on the social media stuff at Jocko Willink.
Right on, man.
That's me, man.